All right. Well, good day. Hello. Welcome to our WES Lunch and Learn series. Just as a reminder, these evolved as a fun and friendly way for WES Advisory Committee members, WES staff, and other folks to really get better acquainted and learn about specific topics that impact or relate to WES. These are meant to be fun and informal, and this is a lunch and learn. So if you need to, keep your camera on, keep it off, make your lunch, eat your lunch, whatever you need to do. All that we ask is that you stay on mute unless you're speaking or asking a question. My name is Christopher Bowker. I'm a member of the advisory committee, and together with Chris Kuntz, we will help facilitate today's session. Our goal is to provide a 30 to 40-minute presentation, leave room for questions and discussion, and get you back to your workday by 1 p.m. Today's topic is on successfully implementing an illicit discharge detection and elimination program, IDDE, a lot of acronyms today, for a medium-sized municipal separate stormwater system, MS4, and TMDL program by Chris Desiderati. And at this point, I will turn it over to you, Chris, to introduce yourself and give us the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm going to turn my video off, but keep my audio on and share this presentation. You guys seeing the full screen?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. Okay, that was way smoother than our practice run. Good. Glad we did that. So yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm an environmental services supervisor with Water Environment Services. I've been working for Water Environment Services for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years, and I started kind of just testing samples from our wastewater plants and from our surface water service area, management area. So I've kind of worked my way to leading a group of people that implement this program. I have a background in college education and chemistry, and I went back to grad school for environmental science. So I've got a little bit of book learning as well as some practical skills. But this presentation I gave earlier this year at a stormwater professional conference. So I've tried to morph it just to be a little more casual and educational for folks, but also explain how we do this work at WES. So I'll dive in. Here's what I want to cover today. First, we're going to go over some background on WES and our MS4 system, as well as some other regulatory drivers that that kind of dictate how we do and implement our IDDE program. Then I'll talk about illicit discharges, again, kind of fundamentals. Then shift to our historic program that we've had for over 20 years. And then finally, I will talk about our current program and some tools that Aqua, which is just a kind of advocacy organization, has developed for communities to use, and then Q&A. So I want to dive in first to definitions because like Christopher said, there are a lot of acronyms in this business, and I tend to try as I might swing into them naturally. So IDDE is this comprehensive program to detect and eliminate illicit discharges. MS4 system, I'll explain kind of what that is in more detail, but it's just easiest way to think about it is a system of pipes underground that convey stormwater. A non-point source is everything that's not a point source. A TMDL is kind of, you can think of it as like a budget of pollution that any water body can receive and still meet water quality standards. And then UICs are dry wells, in short. So things, typically concrete devices that collect stormwater and inject it underground, at least in our business. So next, let's get into the difference between a combined and separate storm system. So this is just like very elementary kind of illustration of the difference between these two stormwater systems. So the combined system on the left is a great example of that sort of configuration is what the city of Portland has, our neighbors to the north. And that's just a series of pipes underground that convey wastewater and stormwater to a wastewater treatment plant. This is how a lot of older, large cities were designed in the last century or two or older. And the goal then was to really just get the water away from the city to a river or to a treatment plant. As cities grew and stormwater began to overload those systems, newer communities started building these MS4 systems where the stormwater is conveyed underground, typically in pipes separate from the toilets and sinks and wastewater, which is sent to a treatment plant, and that stormwater is sent straight to a creek, typically untreated and not touched at all, so just straight into a water body. There are different types of MS4 systems in Oregon, and how Oregon kind of separates those is into a phase 1 and a phase 2 permit. And what separates those two phases are the size of the community, and the cutoff is about 100,000 people that the systems serve. So I like to use shapes just to think of things. And these two shapes, the octagon for phase 1 and the hexagon for phase 2, it does not have to do with UFC fighting or anything. It has to do with minimum control measures, they're called. And these are just basically they're practices that the communities do in order to meet the MEP standard for these permits, the maximum extent practicable standard. So these are activities that a community will do to try to minimize pollution. And I think the highlight here is that the IDDE program is common amongst both types of permits. There's some other practices and measures in each. There's more in phase 1 than phase 2, but the IDDE is universal. So no matter how small or big your community is. Okay, WES's service area. So this slide just sort of introduces our service area. In our MS4 population, at least in the WES family, which I'll talk about in who that consists of, there's 90,000 people, about 66 square miles of land that it covers, and over 19,000 catch basins and manholes. So when you're thinking about illicit discharge and protecting the system from, illegal dumping or what have you, we can't post a person at every one of those catch basins to watch it every day. So we make a lot of strategic choices to do what we can and target specific areas and problems that we think are out there and just work smart. This is a photo of our MS4 permit, our current one that we have. And earlier I talked about the WES family. What's kind of unique about our MS4 permit at WES is that we have 12 co-permittees that are party to it, each with their own sort of ways they implement the permit. There are 4 folks in this group: the City of Happy Valley, Water Environment Services, City of River Grove, and the county that sort of are the WES family. So that's that 90,000 person kind of rough number population. But what pushes us into a phase 1 permit is these other co-permitting communities. So when you lump us all together, we're in the 150,000 people range, so easily over that threshold. There is a lot of collaboration amongst us 12 co-permittees, though, and there are things in the permit that tell us to coordinate when there are illicit discharges in other jurisdictions, so that we also either respond to them or notify our neighbors if the discharge might affect their system. All right. I said talk about a little bit in the definition slide about what drives our IDDE program. And there's really 3 main things. Most of what I'll talk about today is the MS4 permit, but just as like sort of a point of reference, there are also our TMDL implementation plans, which cover non-point source areas. There is a strategy in there to detect and eliminate illicit discharges, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But it just kind of rolls into how we do our IDDE reporting and response. We also have a UIC, those dry wells I talked about. We have a permit from the state as well that has an IDDE best management practice, and how that kind of is realized in practice is when there's spills to dry wells, we will also respond to them and report as necessary to the state to protect groundwater quality. That's what that WPCF permit's more about, protecting groundwater quality and drinking water. All right. What is an illicit discharge? It's basically anything other than stormwater, with a lot of exceptions. There's a small caveat that I try to make, and that a spill strictly is not necessarily an illicit discharge until it reaches an MS4. So spills can become illicit discharges, but we might respond to them and report them differently than illicit discharges, but we still take them seriously. So you can kind of picture like something getting spilled at a property, but gets stopped before it reaches like a catch basin, which then can flow to a creek. So some examples of these allowable non-stormwater discharges that come from our permit you can think of are landscape irrigation water. So a home or a business irrigating their property, as long as the pesticides and fertilizers are being used according to their label. Or rising groundwater is another example, which could enter into a MS4 system underground. And foundation, footing, and crawl space drains. So a lot of folks have crawl space sump pumps just to keep water away from their foundation in areas of high groundwater. And homes are allowed to discharge that to the storm system. Okay, so here we want to sort of think about what illicit discharge detection is within the context of a municipal separate storm sewer system. And so I have at the top these two basically prohibited types of illicit discharges, and I segregate them between direct and indirect. It's kind of semantics, but because they both, have the same negative outcome. But a spill, or in this picture, this is a property that's tracking out a lot of concrete, wastewater, and sludge into the public right-of-way. Anytime that happens, that usually then gets washed into a public storm system, which then goes straight to a creek, as this diagram shows. And in the top right, you see this this crazy photo. This is not something Wes has taken or got a photo of. This was out of a reference material, but that's a wastewater pipe that punched through a stormwater pipe and then broke. So it's just dripping straight sewage into the stormwater pipe. So those are both prohibited, obviously, and we try to detect and eliminate those. In contrast, there are those allowable stormwater discharges I talked about earlier as examples. And those are all allowed, provided that they're not significant sources of pollution. So if we find they're recurring or affecting surface water, we would respond. Okay, these are the IDDE program elements. Now, I just want to introduce this slide, not for us to read. You can come back to this, but these are the requirements in our current permit for implementing an IDDE program. And there's a lot. The takeaway on this slide is that there are a lot, and we have a lot of best management practices to meet our permit requirements. What I'll talk about today are just these two elements in the middle, the IDDE program itself, and then our dry weather screening program. But there are other elements that we do separately, like a legal authority would be like our local sewer use rules, and getting those approved and updated appropriately, as well as some like education and training that happens to internal staff. So next, I want to go to our historic program. So at that point in the presentation, and right now we're going to time travel back to 1995, which I was a wee boy then, when WES was first issued its first MS4 permit. At that time, the permit was only 10 pages long, which is wild to think about, considering our current one, which is write this down, I think the fourth iteration of our permit. That permit is up to 57 pages. So it's gotten a lot longer, a lot more complex. Another difference with the first permit and the types of permits issued now are that the stormwater management plan document used to be submitted with the permit application. So it was kind of backwards to how it is now. You'd submit this plan to how you'd implement the permit before you got the permit. It's reversed now, which I believe is a better way. And now we get the permit issued and we have some time to develop a plan to comply with the permit. So things have changed. Also, our earliest permit had nothing in the permit itself that explicitly called itself IDDE. It said you have to effectively prohibit non-stormwater discharges, which are illicit discharges. But that was sort of that we did talk about IDDE in that first permits swamp or stormwater management plan, as we call it. Actually, I'll call it a swamp probably moving forward. So that was sort of the IDDE program. Historically, our dry weather outfall inspection program has been and was until last summer pretty routine. We would visit about 40 to 43 outfalls that were in the exact same place every year during the dry season after, there would be no rain for 72 hours. We'd go to these big pipes. We'd look for water. There shouldn't be any water if it hasn't rained and it's a storm system. And if we found water, we would trace it upstream, up the system to try to find if there was a source of illicit discharge. And we would rarely find any illicit discharge sources this way. I was curious and I went back through our annual reports back to 2010 and just counted up the number of reported illicit discharges and spills that we said we had to the state. And this is sort of a chart showing how those change through time. And the reason why this chart's here is not to show any real kind of trend, but more just to show that that reporting varies a lot from year to year. There was even a year in 2013 here in the front where we had more reported spills than illicit discharges that we told the state about. But this is not, this is kind of like a cautionary tale of a chart. I would not encourage or recommend that just because you have fewer reported illicit discharges, your program is working well or not working well. It's more complicated than that. Just because you aren't getting reports of illicit discharges doesn't mean they're not happening out there. So I kind of wanted to put this up here as a cautionary tale when we think about what is success and what isn't success. This can help you kind of monitor performance though. So it was fun to just put these numbers together and look at trend and look at kind of a timeline of these incidents. Okay, so now we're going to get into the current program. And first we'll talk about the illicit discharge program. And I use this metaphor, the only one I'll use is the three wise monkeys during this presentation. And if you haven't heard of the three wise monkeys, it's this kind of old, I don't know, I don't know the right literary term, but it's sort of a lesson to not dwell on evil thoughts or, maybe just ignore things that are improper or just look the other way when something goes wrong. Kind of just, ignorance is bliss is maybe another way to say it. And the reason I bring the monkeys up is that I think they're a terrible example for implementing a good IDDE program, because I think a successful IDDE program not just doesn't close their ears, their mouth, or their eyes to what's happening in the system. They receive reports of illicit discharges, they communicate with their neighbors and jurisdictions, and they keep their eyes open for things they see when they're out in the field, rather than just, pass on by. So in each of these elements I'm going to talk about in our program, I have these monkeys on the side just showing what I think the element emphasizes and what the monkeys we want to ignore are. So one of the first elements is our website. And the way we maintain this best management practice is as a publicly accessible website is having this really handy, like front-facing, first thing you see if you navigate to the WES website is this reporting link, which will send our customer service team whatever report the public sends us. And this is really just facilitating that reporting to WES by the public. There's also internal to WES reporting that's separate from this. We maintain, so if our collections crew is out and sees something funky, like they literally did today, we have some channels that we can use to communicate with each other, or send someone out to respond and document those things. The next one is kind of the meat and potatoes of an IDDE program, and that's our response sort of flow chart. This is out of our internal SOP, so I'm definitely not gonna walk us through this, but I if I could point out one thing, I'd point out this timeline along the bottom, and emphasize that our permit has very stringent response deadlines we have to meet. So the moment we receive the report, we're supposed to initiate our response within 1 day. We're supposed to, respond by immediately halting the discharge or calling the right parties if it's a hazardous material pretty soon after that. And in the case of really complicated illicit discharges, where we need to do capital projects to resolve them, we have a lot longer timelines to fix those. But this is really the complicated part of documenting, telling the right people, notifying our neighbors when necessary, writing ORS reports, with an emphasis on just these deadlines we have to meet that our permit requires. So I want to tell you guys about some real life examples of illicit discharges. This was a private property in our service area that we got a anonymous complaint from a neighbor about. And in the left picture under that manhole is a private sewer lift station that has some submersible pumps that would receive water from the property and pump through a force main up to the public system. And there was some maintenance that we received reports was happening on this pump station. The maintenance involving cleaning out the sludge in the bottom of the station. And the person who complained to us was telling us that they were just dumping the sludge in these red circled areas. So this landscaped area where there's kind of dark stained bark chips and that fence line in the background of the right picture. Another thing that occurred, probably not a part of that maintenance project, but some other utility work that was going on, was the force main pipe developed a crack along the sidewall of it, and we were seeing what we think was raw sewage bubbling up through the asphalt roadway and then dribbling down to this catch basin highlighted in yellow, which then flowed directly back behind that fence to a wetland area. So not a great outcome at all. And the property owners, once we told them about it, got on fixing it. But I think this was a good example of public complaints helping us find this. It's kind of tucked away from the public roadway. We probably wouldn't have seen it as easily on our own. And it was a private lift station, so it would have been something we'd maintain at WES. It'd be something the property owner was responsible for. Another real world example is a little different of a story. So this is a to be unnamed food service establishment in our service area, and our fats, oils, and grease inspector was visiting this establishment to look at its grease interceptor. Picture of the top of that interceptor is on the top left here with those two manhole lids, one being removed. And any functioning grease interceptor should never look like that underneath the lid. It should not be waste up to the bottom of the lid. It was so full and overflowing that it was spilling into the parking area, flowing down to a catch basin, which then flowed to a private dry well on the property. But cars were driving through this waste. Customers were parking their cars and walking walking through the wastewater and tracking it indoors. And we weren't getting a lot of great response from the establishment at first. So we called our partners at the public health department, told them what was going on, made clear that we saw customers tracking this indoors, and the public health department shut the restaurant down and said, you need to clean this up before we're going to reopen you again. And that got the restaurant's attention, and they wanted to open back up again. So they agreed to keep this interceptor pumped down until they could make the necessary repairs. And they continued to pump the interceptor down in real time for a couple weeks until they could make the correct repairs and have it drain freely again. Because Wes continued to visit this restaurant for those weeks to make sure they kept the interceptor down and it didn't continue to spill, so that the restaurant could open up again and serve customers. So we were staying on top of it. The restaurant eventually repaired this, and things are going better now. But this was just kind of a fortuitous illicit discharge we stumbled on. Done with the real world examples. Some other elements of our program are in the outreach and educational realm. And if Alexa Morris was here from WES, she would give a very, very good summary of all the work that WES does to provide outreach and materials for the public. One thing I'll focus on here is the storm drain assistance program, highlighted in bold, and that's a program that WES has had for a very long time. And it's essentially a negotiation we made with a private vendor that will clean private storm drains on properties at a discounted rate. So anytime we're inspecting a property, doing a private stormwater system inspection, maybe we see that their catch basins and storm drains need maintenance. We always try to educate the property owner that, hey, we have this program. If you want a reduced cost to clean this storm drain, feel free to reach out to this vendor. And we evaluate those vendors. I think we look at it every year or two just to make sure they still are doing, meeting performance standards we make for them. But yeah, another kind of in the realm of education and outreach is this IDDE toolkit, which was a really cool project. I wasn't personally involved in, but happened back in the year 2020. It was sort of when these materials were completed, and they mostly consist of kind of handouts that are audience targeted. So the way Wes implemented those handouts, as one example, the spills and leaks handout meant more for homeowners, is we kind of converted them into website blogs. So we can just direct people to our website, or if they're just searching around on it because they love Wes that much, they'll find these sort of preventative messages and resources for where to send, like, household hazardous waste, links to Metro, responsible ways to maintain things and not affect the storm drains. This is another example of one of those items from the toolkit that I thought was fun to bring up because of that food service establishment case study. But this is something we have given to some FSEs that has these like big clear pictures. I believe there's a copy in Spanish too. There's also space for co-branding at the bottom to put like a community logo on, or like a West logo, for example. And just says like what not to do, and like at the bottom has these what to do's at the top, what not to do's at the bottom. Like empty this picture on the right, this guy just like straight draining his grease container into a manhole. That's not what we want. Or washing their hood filters outside. These are some other examples that I just have up here as comparisons on kind of landscape services for homeowners. The one on the left is for landscape companies, like the folks that cut grass and apply pesticides. And the one on the right is more for homeowners that are hiring landscapers. So on the left, the verbiage is directed towards folks that, would know what chemicals they use in their jobs are. As in contrast, the handouts on the right are more geared towards kind of a layman's, more direct speech. And there's this link at the bottom to the EcoBiz program, which certifies environmentally conscious landscape companies and auto body shops. So there's a link to sort of have folks, consider looking to those companies that make pledges and have environmentally safe, responsible practices and get certified for that. So just like kind of audience tailored messaging is the point of the toolkit, depending on who it's going to. Moving on to the IDDE program, I want to leave some time for questions, but our TV inspection is another important part. We're looking in our sanitary sewer lines all the time. We're looking for cross connections this way. We're reviewing redevelopment permits. When we're cleaning our stormwater ponds, we're looking for illicit discharges there. There's been instances where we've seen toilet paper and wastewater coming into a stormwater pond, and that is a sure sign of a cross connection. So we've stopped some cross connections that way in the past year or two. And now I want to move on to our dry weather program. So our dry weather inspection program, like I said in the beginning, we would visit those 43 outfalls every summer. We called those major outfalls. They were large pipes serving very large drainage areas. We also lumped in some minor outfalls. But last summer, we kind of suddenly had a new approach to inspecting those dry weather outfalls, and it's something that we hadn't done before. And we made a measurable goal for ourselves to inspect 10% of our known outfalls each year in our entire service area. So that's roughly 70 to 90 outfalls each summer we're targeting to inspect, which is over double what we used to inspect. And some of these outfalls we've never been to since they were maybe constructed. So we're getting a lot of information when we go there, access notes, any missing attributes like the material the pipe's made out of, is the size correct, or was there a problem when we mapped it from the as-built documents? So we're also looking for illicit discharges when we're on site. So how we kind of thought and dreamed up that process would work is we knew we wanted to divide all of our outfalls into 10 groups to cover all of our outfalls in 10 years. So we also knew we wanted to geographically cluster those groups so our inspectors weren't scooting all over basically unincorporated Clackamas County in the city of Happy Valley each summer. So our GIS analyst split our service area into these squares called quarter quads and basically counted up to between 70 and 90 and would group those as group A. So the first summer we inspected group A. There's some other dots in there that aren't yellow as inspected that were mapped after. We'll just have to go back and visit either this coming summer or the next. Group B is in the Northeast, and then we just kind of continue on and shoot for getting through all of them in 10 years. I'm going to skip over these two so I leave time, but these are sort of the handout materials our GIS analyst made for us, these really beautiful detailed aerials of the outfalls and adjacent features, tax lots, anything that can help us get to the outfall. Our field crews each spring get the same grouping list from us and help clear vegetation to the outfalls where they can for us. So once summer starts, we can go find these outfalls easier instead of hacking through blackberry bushes that are 7 feet tall. And we continue we have these ongoing conversations with GIS so that the mapping stays updated, and we send data back to GIS about these inspections we do. If there's updates to the attribute table, like we find that a pipe is actually a plastic pipe and not a concrete pipe, or it's a 16-inch instead of a 12-inch pipe, we can update our GIS file. if we find water when we get to an outfall pipe, these are the 6 parameters that we can quickly measure with field meters. So it's sort of a kind of a workflow process. We'll collect a sample of that water we find, and if it is in these green areas, we determine that that water is an allowable discharge and move on from that outfall. If it's in the red areas, or or there's other physical observations like, oh, there's an oil sheen in this water, but it's still in all the green areas, we'll investigate further and trace it up the system to try to find the source of illicit discharge. The main goal of these action levels, though, is to just be efficient with our work and not chase down every single discharge we find, because some of them are allowable. Could just be irrigation water, as an example, or foundation drains. So the last thing I think I talk about is how we're doing these inspections now. We used to have a beautiful big 3-ring binder that weighed 60 pounds. We carry around and write on paper. We're now using what has been around for a long time. Central Square is basically an asset maintenance database. So all of those outfalls that we have mapped are their own assets, and we just apply these inspection forms to each asset. So when we visit them in the summer, we just create a new inspection on the discharge pipe or the outfall, and we do it all on tablets. We sort of piloted it last year, and this is sort of a screenshot of what our tablets look like. And our stormwater assets in the field, all the red dots are the inspected outfalls on the left. In the middle is our inspection form we can fully customize. And on the right is a photo of an outfall we actually went to, that we can take the photo on the tablet and then upload it directly to the form on the tablet without having to download photos from our phone or something, and then attach it in the office or something. And then, yeah, the last dry weather BMP is just updating and maintaining our map of outfalls, which this new inspection sort of approach that we're taking now is allowing us to do in tandem with the actual field surveys. So we're sort of knocking two things over, 2 dominoes over at the same time when we're doing all this and fulfilling 2 of these BMPs. In bold here, the priority locations mapping is something that we did when we had just 40 outfalls we inspected every single year. But now that we're visiting all of them and not prioritizing any of them, we don't need to pay attention to that anymore, which is a little bit less work for us, in a sense. We're just going to visit them all instead of a select subset. And then chronic illicit discharges are a special case that can come up from time to time. So last slide for questions. How can you guys help? These are just like kind of your basic see something, say something. So really an ounce of prevention, is worth a pound of cure. We get a lot of reports. Some of them are crank calls, you could say, or characterize as. Others are like unsatisfying. You don't always find the source of every illicit discharge that gets reported to you, but if we document it and it happens again, we have more information than we did the first time. So that's part of what we're trying to do moving forward. Obviously use pesticides and dispose of pesticides responsibly. Consider some of these options. The Streamside Steward program is a North Clackamas Watershed Council initiative. Wes has got river health grants. There's EcoBiz landscapers, and obviously reach out to Wes if you're not sure if something you see. We'll always try to answer questions as quick as we can. And these are the amazing people that do all of the hard bushwhacking work and listen to my crazy harebrained ideas to implement them or respond to illicit discharges out there. Susan is the GIS analyst. And Andrew, Matt, Rob, and Galen do a lot of responses and dry weather inspections. That's my presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. And I was going to say, if I know William, I bet he might have a question or two. So, William, it looks like you raised your hand.
Let me get my volume here attached. We're trying to get some work done here at the same time. This is another perhaps Mr. Desiderati. I don't see your picture anymore. I know.
Oh,
There you go. See your smiling face. Much.
I was looking down at my notes. I didn't want you guys to think I was avoiding.
Wing it. So here's a harebrained idea for you. I see a lot of residential homes, mine included, that have the downspouts from their gutters going into a pipe which goes under the lawn and out into the street and then to the storm drain. Now, I never water my lawn. Let me underline that. I never water my lawn. So in the spring and fall, it's beautifully green. But winter and summer, it's brown. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, natural coloring. But it seemed to me as though maybe Wes could consider some form of if they wanted to incentivize converting those downspouts into distribution systems to water people's lawns and not have it go through the pipes. I don't know how to incentivize them other than, listen, if you take that pipe and disconnect it from that pipe going into the gutter and put it on your lawn instead, I don't know, just something to think about. It does bother me that all that rainwater off of the roof, and it's a big impervious area, just goes into the gutter.
Yeah. I was going to mention what Christopher chatted about. I know there's a pretty big program in Portland. I know I've disconnected my downspouts in Milwaukee because of foundation damage. My house I bought was having, instead of for the reason you bring up, William, but it's a great idea. And yeah, it'd be I don't know if have you talked to the folks at Portland, how they've implemented their system.
Are you speaking to me?
Yeah.
No, I don't talk to anybody. And honestly, well, we have chosen not to purchase this home, so we are renters. So I would need to, make it worth my landlord's while to go through any effort to change that. But if it was a neutral cost, maybe they would be willing to do something like that. Just a thought.
Yeah. And I do know for the city of Portland, just because I went through this when I used to live there. So that was, I guess, about a decade ago or so. So things could have changed. But it used to be sort of on your honor. You would just let them know that you've disconnected your drain spouts. And at that time, I think they would take I don't know, $40 off the total sewer bill because the same bureau manages stormwater, sewer, and other similar things, environmental services. And that's how they handled it. And I think by entering into that program, you did authorize, I presume they would periodically just check on a sample size of homes. I don't think they ever came out to check my home that I certainly was never aware of it, but that's how they handled it. And it at least from my side and the customer side, it was pretty slick.
Yeah. Really good presentation, Christopher. Thank you very much. The other Christopher 1 and Christopher 2. No, I don't know. Yeah,
that works.
Oh yeah,
that works for me.
Both pretty cute. I don't know which one to talk about. Yeah. I've got kids older than you. So the only other comment that I had was your three monkey scenario. That I was raised on the concept of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Yeah. I like the three monkeys because, I mean, to me, it is kind of like, to me, it represents like sort of avoiding bad things, like getting away from bad people in your life or something. But a lot of the times, illicit discharges are kind of hidden, dirty things. And I think you really need to like kind of lean into responding to those reports and trying to find them when you can, without being, expending a ton of resources on minor impacts, but finding the big problems. So yeah, did a little bit of, it was fun to learn more about the three monkeys, where they came from and stuff. Monkeys are mischievous.
I had to Google that. I hadn't heard of that. It looks like it's based in Buddhism or Confucianism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we lost you there for a minute, William, but you're back and you're on mute. William, you're on mute still.
There. I don't know how I get disconnected. My wife Joyce and I walk up to the post office and back every day, a couple miles, and we like to walk a lot. But we were walking by a gas station and saw this water coming up out of the ground that was just flowing in a little river down the gutter into a storm drain. And I can't walk by something like that. So I went up and told the gas attendant, and he went and told his manager. And by the time we walked back to the post office, it had all been cleared up. They somehow turned it off. I don't know if it was a broken water sprinkler system or what the story was, but there was a lot of water that was just flowing down into the drain. And if you don't say something, people don't know about it. So I say, see something, say something.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, me too. I mean, it's my taxes that are also paying for that. So, or my fees anyway.
And I just saw a couple hands, and I don't know who raised their hand first, if it was you, Ron, or I believe you, Christine. Ron, you want to go first?
Yeah, Christina, I'm this way, not that
Christina.
way.
Okay.
I was just going to comment on the downspout disconnect incentive program. That's very common for municipalities like Portland to do when they have combined sewer systems. And so they're treating rainwater. And then when you run into like capacity issues, or like Portland had, you have frequent combined sewer overflows, which is illegal, and they're under a consent decree with the EPA. They really it's more cost effective for them to incentivize people disconnecting their downspouts into that combined system. So a lot of people do that for the like largely separated systems like WES manages on the surface water side. Unless there's a known capacity issue, it doesn't pencil to disconnect or to incentivize people to disconnect. There are some capacity issues, pipe capacity limitations, and you would just do the math and say, it would cost this much to increase the size of this pipe, or we could spend this much to try and incentivize people to disconnect and reduce the volume. Oregon City has some combined sewer, and so for an organization like Oregon City, unless they disconnect the sewer, which they're doing some of, they might have an incentive program for their capacity issues, but that's the context for most people's disconnection programs.
Yes, thank you for that, Ron. That's actually very, very helpful to know.
Maybe I'll talk to our public works department, ask them if they've thought about this.
All right, and then Christina.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on something similar in terms of incentives. If you have combined sewer, you want to try to keep as much storm water out as possible so you don't back up against your max capacity. The interesting thing I was thinking about in terms of new developments, there was a lot of new developments, so not disconnecting of the water spouts, but I know there's that really big, like 170 house development down in Canby right now, where the roof downspouts are just kind of being plumbed up to dry wells throughout the area, as opposed to discharging to any kind of surface water. And so that was something I just had not heard of happening in the area. Do you guys know if that's a common thing to have new developments do dry wells to handle stormwater?
Ron might know more than me. That's what I did at my house, though.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
very well.
And yeah.
It definitely is, Christina. That's a great question. And, it just depends on whether you're in an area or the development is in an area that can facilitate infiltration well in the right types of soils. And so some of our rapidly growing areas like Happy Valley, they have like C and D type soils, which are known to not infiltrate very well, or on steep slopes and things like that. And so They will if they can, and part of that is driven by the stormwater standard. WES's stormwater design standards really incentivize infiltrating where you can and not discharging it to the public system, because it makes your stormwater facilities smaller when they run the model. And so they're like, well, I'm going to lose land and I have to build this huge stormwater facility. So they will do some individual home infiltration systems and things like that just to save themselves money. But it's more of an incentive program than a requirement.
Oh,
All right. Well, we're 1 minute over, so I failed to get you back to your work life on time. But thank you very much, Christopher, for this presentation. Very informative. A lot of Chris's and Christopher's in this meeting. Chris, I believe per usual, you will take this presentation and post it to
Absolutely.
WES's website so that others may access it. Any final questions or comments before we bid adieu?
You did a good job, Mr. Bowker. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christopher.
Yes, you're very welcome, and thanks to Chris Kuntz for always keeping me on task. I feel like.
Well, thank you for
into this program.
facilitating.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Chris
See you
and
soon.
Ron.
Like,
Bye.